The sky burned red as enormous alien ships descended upon Earth. They came without warning, their massive shadows stretching across cities, mountains, and oceans. People watched in fear as the sky was filled with glowing lights, strange symbols flashing across the alien vessels. Within hours, the world had changed forever. The invaders called themselves the Exilari. Their leader, High Commander Xalcor, stood tall in his shimmering black armor, his red eyes scanning the terrified humans before him. He stepped onto the ruins of what was once a military base, his clawed feet crushing the remains of human technology. His expression was one of amusement. "These creatures are weaker than we thought," he said, his voice echoing through his communicator. His soldiers, tall and armored in silver and black, stood behind him, their weapons glowing with strange energy. They cannot fight. They cannot resist. And yet, they still call themselves intelligent. The humans had tried to fight back. The military had launched missiles, fired bullets, and even sent out their most advanced warplanes. But nothing worked. The Exilari ships had energy shields that made them untouchable. Their weapons melted tanks like butter. Within days, all major cities surrendered. There was no other choice. Commander Xalcor walked through a captured human facility, inspecting the soldiers and scientists who had been forced to kneel before him. One of them, a middle-aged general, glared at the alien leader. His face was covered in dirt, his uniform torn, but his eyes burned with defiance. "You may have won this battle," the general said, his voice steady, "but humans are not so easily broken." Xalcor let out a sharp, cold laugh. His soldiers joined in, their voices filled with mockery. "Not easily broken," Xalcor repeated, his amusement clear. "Then why do I see your people kneeling? Why do I see fear in their eyes?" The general said nothing, but his fists clenched. Xalcor turned his gaze toward a group of human scientists who had been forced to work under alien supervision. The Exilari had taken control of Earth's research facilities, curious about human technology. But what they found only made them laugh. "This is what they call science," one alien soldier sneered, picking up a human-made rifle. He aimed it at a metal wall and fired. The bullet bounced off harmlessly. The Exilari laughed again. "They still use combustion engines," another soldier mocked, tapping on a human vehicle. "Primitive. So primitive." The aliens found human technology amusing. Their own weapons could tear through entire buildings in seconds, while human weapons could barely scratch their armor. They had expected a real fight, but instead they found a species that relied on outdated tools and weak defenses. As the Exilari continued their inspection, one human stood in the background, watching everything in silence. Captain Ryan. Ryan was a soldier, but more than that, he was a strategist. Unlike the others, he didn't react to the alien mockery. He didn't glare, didn't speak out, didn't let anger control him. Instead, he observed. He listened. He studied. He watched the way the aliens moved, the way they communicated, the way they underestimated humans. He noticed something the others didn't: their overconfidence. The Exilari thought they had already won. They saw no threat in the people they had conquered. Ryan knew that was their mistake. For now, he played along. He let them believe humans were weak. He let them laugh. But deep inside, he was already planning. Xalcor continued his speech, addressing both his soldiers and the kneeling humans. "This planet now belongs to the Exilari Empire," he declared. "Your people will work for us, your lands will serve our needs, and your resistance, if you dare to try, will be crushed before it begins." More laughter followed. The humans looked at each other, helpless, afraid. But Ryan, standing in the shadows, remained calm. He knew something the aliens didn't. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. And soon, the Exilari would learn that humans were far from weak. The Exilari had conquered Earth, and for days, they celebrated their victory. Their massive warships hovered in the sky, like gods watching over their new subjects. Humans were forced into labor camps, their cities now under alien control. High Commander Zalcor stood in the heart of his command center, staring at a holographic map of Earth. Reports of complete submission came in from all over the planet. No resistance, no trouble, just obedience. He smiled. Pathetic creatures. But that night, something changed. A soldier goes missing. In a heavily guarded Xilari outpost near the ruins of Washington, D.C., a patrol unit was making its rounds. The night was quiet. The humans were locked away in their barracks, and the Xilari controlled everything. 3 alien soldiers, clad in silver armor, marched through the base. Their glowing weapons hummed softly, scanning for any signs of movement. One of them, a soldier named Zithal, walked a little ahead of the others. He was the youngest of the group, eager to prove himself. And then he was gone. No sound, no struggle, no scream. One moment, Zithal was there, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silence. The next moment, only empty space remained. His 2 comrades stopped in their tracks. They glanced at each other, their glowing eyes narrowing in confusion. "Zthal," one of them called out. No response. They activated their scanners, searching for his energy signature. Nothing. Weapons raised, they moved cautiously forward, their bodies tense. "This is Patrol Unit 4. One of them spoke into his communicator. "We have a situation." "A soldier has." The communicator crackled. Then, static. The second soldier took a step back, his heart pounding. Something's wrong. Then, a shadow moved. The third soldier turned, but it was too late. A pair of unseen hands grabbed him from behind, and he too was gone. The last remaining soldier let out a panicked shout and ran toward the command center. His feet pounded against the cold metal floors, his breath coming in short gasps. The lights flickered. Then the base alarms went off. Zalcor's rage. Minutes later, Zalcor stormed into the base, his red eyes burning with anger. His personal guards followed closely behind, weapons drawn. "What happened?" he demanded. The lone surviving soldier knelt before him, trembling. "2 of our men vanished, Commander, without a trace." Zalcor's claws dug into the metal armrest of his chair. "Vanished," he repeated, his voice sharp. "Are you telling me that primitive humans, creatures who can barely grasp the concept of space travel, somehow took out 2 Xilari warriors?" Without a sound, the soldier hesitated. He knew how foolish it sounded. "We found no weapons, no bodies, no footprints. Just emptiness." Zalcor's jaw tightened. He turned to his officers. "I want full surveillance, double the patrols, increase security in all occupied zones." His second-in-command, General Vrillis, nodded. "Yes, Commander." Zalcor's claws tapped against the table. He wasn't worried. Yet. But this was the first time something had happened that he didn't understand. And he hated that. Ryan watches from the shadows. Miles away, hidden in the ruins of an old skyscraper, Captain Ryan adjusted his night vision goggles, a small smirk on his face. His team sat beside him, watching the auxiliary response from a hacked alien drone feed. "They're panicking," whispered one of his men. Ryan nodded. "Good. Let them." They had only just begun. The auxiliary thought humans were weak. They were about to learn the truth. The auxiliary were no longer laughing. The disappearances should have been impossible. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans had. Their energy scanners could detect life forms from miles away. Their security systems were designed to be flawless. And yet, their soldiers were vanishing. Another night, another soldier gone. A high-ranking Xilari officer, Lieutenant Veclor, led a new patrol through a captured human city. The streets were empty, the buildings dark and abandoned. His squad of 5 moved cautiously, their glowing rifles scanning the shadows. The tension was thick, but Veclor refused to show fear. "Stay alert," he growled. "We are superior. Do not let this anomaly distract you." They marched forward, their boots clicking against the pavement. The only sound was the hum of their weapons and the occasional flicker of broken streetlights. Then, a whisper. The auxiliary turned sharply, their weapons raised. But there was nothing, just the wind. One of the soldiers exhaled sharply. "Sir, this place feels wrong." Veclor sneered. "You let fear cloud your judgment. Humans are primitive. They lack stealth. They lack the intelligence to." The soldier beside him vanished. No sound, no movement, no sign of a struggle. 1 second, he was there. The next, only empty space remained. The auxiliary aimed their weapons wildly, scanning every corner of the street. "Report." Veclor barked into his communicator. "Static." A second soldier cursed under his breath. "Sir, we need to retreat." "Something is." His voice cut off with a choked gasp. Veclor turned just in time to see him dragged into the darkness. The glow of his armor faded. Then, nothing. The remaining 3 auxiliary backed up, their movements sharp and frantic. Their weapons trembled in their hands. For the first time in his life, Veclor felt something unfamiliar. Fear. The auxiliary commanders react. Back at the main auxiliary warship, Commander Xalcor paced furiously. Reports were flooding in from multiple bases. More soldiers had vanished. No bodies, no energy signatures, nothing left behind. The disappearances weren't random anymore. They were targeted. General Vrelis stood beside him, his expression tense. "This is no accident, Commander. This is an attack." Xalcor slammed his fist onto the table. "By who? The humans have no such capability." Vrelis hesitated. "Perhaps we underestimated them." Xalcor's eyes narrowed. The thought was insulting. Humans were weak. They were inferior. They should have been easy to break. And yet his soldiers were afraid to patrol at night. They whispered of ghosts, of an unseen force picking them off one by one. Fear was growing. Morale was collapsing. This was not the behavior of a conquered species. This was something else. Ryan's plan unfolds. Deep in an underground human hideout, Captain Ryan watched the latest reports with satisfaction. His team sat around him, silent and focused. The auxiliary thought their technology made them invincible, but technology wasn't everything. Terror, confusion, paranoia. These were weapons too. Ryan turned to his team. "They think we're weak. That's good. Let's keep proving them wrong." The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The auxiliary were no longer in control. Yes, they still had their warships, their energy weapons, and their technology. But something far more dangerous had taken hold of their forces: fear. Xalcor stood in the dimly lit war room, his red eyes scanning the reports floating in the holographic display before him. More soldiers missing, more patrols lost. No alarms, no struggle, no bodies. It was as if the night itself had swallowed them whole. General Vrelis spoke cautiously. "Commander, this is no ordinary resistance. The humans. Air nothing." Xalcor cut him off, but his voice lacked its usual certainty, because deep inside, he knew something was very wrong. The auxiliary tried to regain control. Desperate to regain order, Xalcor issued new commands. All patrols would move in groups of 10 instead of 3. Drones would sweep every occupied zone. Any human caught outside designated zones would be executed immediately. The auxiliary needed to remind humans who was in charge. And yet, despite all the precautions, the disappearances didn't stop. Instead, they increased. The larger the patrols, the more soldiers vanished. Entire squads would march into the ruins of a city and never return. It was no longer just nighttime. The disappearances were happening during the day. Xalcor's hands clenched into fists. He had conquered many planets before, but never had he faced an enemy he couldn't see. Ryan's secret plan is revealed. Far beneath the ruins of an old city, Captain Ryan and his team sat in their underground command center. A wall of monitors displayed live footage from hacked auxiliary drones, tracking every movement of the enemy. One of Ryan's men, Davis, grinned as he watched another squad of Silari disappear from the screen. "That's squad number 47. It won't be coming back." Ryan nodded. His plan was working perfectly. The truth was simple. Humans had never been helpless. They had been studying the Exilari long before the invasion. They had learned that Silari energy scanners couldn't detect life in certain underground zones. They had discovered that the aliens had blind spots in their helmet vision. They had developed a way to jam Silari communications just long enough to strike and vanish. This wasn't just a resistance. This was a psychological war. Instead of fighting head-on, Ryan had turned Exilari's own arrogance against them. By making them believe the disappearances were supernatural, he had planted the seed of fear, and fear, he knew, was stronger than any weapon. The Exilari start to break. Inside the alien barracks, Silari soldiers whispered among themselves. Some believed the humans, the mighty Exilari Empire, was cracking. For the first time in their history, they weren't the hunters, they were the hunted. Commander Exalcor stormed through the halls of his warship, his claws clicking against the polished metal floor. His officers followed behind, their usual discipline replaced with nervous glances. The reports were undeniable. Patrols were refusing to go out at night. Squads were disappearing in broad daylight. Fear was spreading like an infection. And then there was the human message. Leave Earth or vanish forever. It played on repeat, hijacking Silari communication channels. No matter how many times they shut it down, it came back. The humans were toying with them. Soldiers refused to fight. Deep in Exilari barracks, a group of alien warriors argued in hushed tones. "This planet is cursed," one of them hissed. "I won't march into the dark just to disappear. We are Exilari. We do not fear the weak," another growled, but his voice wavered. The truth was, they had stopped seeing humans as weak. The disappearances made no sense. Their technology couldn't track the enemy. Their energy weapons were useless against an opponent that never showed itself. Some soldiers started questioning the invasion itself. "We should leave." The word leave had never been spoken in a Silari war. They always conquered, always crushed resistance. But now, some weren't sure anymore. Xalcor's desperate counterattack. Xalcor refused to admit weakness. He called for a planet-wide sweep. Every remaining Silari soldier would march in massive formations, moving through human territories with heavy firepower. No more small patrols, no more quiet hunting. They would flush out the resistance with brute force. That was the plan. But Ryan had predicted this. Ryan's trap is set. Underground, Ryan and his team watched as thousands of Silari forces deployed in a massive coordinated attack. Davis smirked. "They're scared. They're trying to force us out." Ryan nodded. "Let them come." Because this wasn't just a fight. It was a mind game. The Exilari believed they were leading the attack. But in reality, they were walking into the biggest trap of the war. As the Exilari forces moved forward, something chilling happened. One by one, entire squadrons began to disappear, not from human attacks, from their own fear. Panic took over. Some Silari started firing at shadows. Others turned on their own commanders, believing they were being led to slaughter. Within hours, the grand attack collapsed. The mighty Exilari army, the same one that had crushed Earth's defenses in days, was now in total chaos. The breaking point. Back on the warship, Xalcor watched in horror as his forces fell apart. He had never seen his soldiers break, never seen them refuse orders, never seen them afraid. But the humans had done what no enemy had ever done. They had turned his own army against itself. This wasn't a war anymore. It was a nightmare. Xalcor clenched his fists, his red eyes burning. But for the first time in his life, A terrifying thought crept into his mind. What if they had already lost? The once mighty Xilari war machine was in freefall. Their forces, once proud and disciplined, were now divided, some too terrified to fight, others desperate to escape the nightmare Earth had become. Commander Xalcor stood rigid in his warship's control center, watching his unstoppable army crumble before his eyes. Squads abandoned their posts. Officers refused to lead patrols. Entire battalions went missing. This was impossible. The Xilari had conquered dozens of worlds, breaking enemies far stronger than humans. And yet, here they were, defeated without a single massive battle. This was not a war of weapons. This was a war of the mind. And the Xilari were losing. The final blow. Xalcor refused to retreat. He refused to believe a primitive species could force the Xilari Empire to its knees. So he made a desperate move. A final show of strength. Target their remaining cities. Asterisk, he growled. We will burn them to the ground. His officers hesitated. The order was clear, but something had changed in them. Some exchanged glances. Others stood frozen. For the first time, they doubted their leader. Xalcor slammed his fist onto the console. Obey me, he roared. But before he could give the full command, the ship's alarms blared. Incoming transmission. Human resistance. Ryan's last message. The control room's main screen flickered. Static buzzed, then cleared, revealing the face of Captain Ryan. Calm, confident, smirking. Commander Xalcor, Ryan said, his voice steady. It's over. Xalcor's claws dug into the armrests of his chair. You have no fleet, no weapons strong enough to challenge us. Ryan chuckled. We never needed them. The screen split, showing live footage of Xilari troops abandoning their posts, fleeing their own bases, refusing orders. Xalcor's breathing slowed. The fear had consumed them. Your soldiers are already beaten, Ryan continued. Your war is lost. The only question is, will you be smart enough to leave before the rest of you vanish? Xalcor gritted his teeth. The rage in his chest boiled over. But deep down, he already knew the truth. The Xilari retreat. Xalcor's officers were no longer looking at him for orders. They were looking at each other. One by one, they reached the same conclusion. This war was unwinnable. And soon, the order was given. The Xilari fleets, once the rulers of the sky, turned back toward orbit. Massive warships lifted off, fleeing Earth's atmosphere. The invasion was over. Earth was free. The victory of humanity. Deep underground, Ryan and his team watched the alien retreat on their monitors. A slow smile spread across his face. They're running. Davis let out a relieved laugh. We actually did it. Ryan exhaled. They had survived. But more than that, they had won. Without spaceships, without superior weapons, they had defeated the Xilari by using their greatest weakness against them: arrogance. The Xilari had seen humans as nothing more than weak creatures to conquer. They never considered what would happen if humans learned how to fight without being seen. Ryan glanced up at the sky, watching the last of the alien ships disappear into the void. Earth belonged to humans again, and no one would ever take it from them. The Xilari were gone. For the first time in months, the skies above Earth were clear. No warships, no patrols, no alien overlords. The invasion was over. But victory came with a cost. The ruins of Earth. Captain Ryan stood on the rooftop of a crumbling skyscraper, looking over what was left of his city. Buildings were in ruins. Streets were empty. Smoke still rose from places where the Xilari had tried to burn humanity into submission. It was a victory, but it didn't feel like one. Ryan's radio crackled. Captain, you there? It was Davis, one of the last commanders of the human resistance. Yeah, I'm here, Ryan replied. What's the situation? Davis sighed. People are coming out of hiding. We're regrouping, but "It's bad, Ryan. Supplies are low. A lot of folks are sick. We need a plan." Ryan nodded to himself. The fight might have been over, but the real challenge was just beginning. The survivors rise. Across the world, the remaining humans emerged from bunkers, underground tunnels, and ruined cities. Former soldiers took charge, organizing the survivors. Engineers started fixing power grids and communication networks. Doctors scrambled to help the sick and wounded. Ryan and his team traveled between survivor camps, helping where they could. It wasn't easy. Some people were too afraid to believe the war was truly over. Others wanted revenge. They wanted to chase the Xilari into space and finish what had been started. Ryan understood the anger. But for now, Earth had to heal. And that started with unity. What happened to the Xilari? Though the alien fleet had retreated, they were not unscathed. The fear they had experienced on Earth had spread through their empire. Soldiers who had survived spoke of ghostly disappearances, unstoppable enemies, and a war they could not win. Entire Xilari legions refused to return to Earth. Their own leaders silenced them, refusing to acknowledge what had happened. But Ryan knew the truth. The Xilari had learned to fear humans, and that fear would keep them away. A message to the stars. Months passed. Earth was still in ruins, but humanity was rebuilding. Ryan stood before a working radio tower, the first long-range transmitter they had managed to restore. He took a deep breath, then sent out a message. A warning. To the Xilari Empire, or any other who thinks Earth is weak. We survived you. We outsmarted you. We defeated you. If you come back, you won't get the chance to leave. The future of humanity. The war was over. But humans were no longer just survivors. They were warriors. And the next time aliens came knocking on Earth's door, humanity would be ready. Earth was no longer just a planet of survivors. It was a planet of warriors. The scars of war still covered the land, ruined cities, abandoned battlefields, and the silent graves of those who had fallen. But amidst the destruction, something stronger was rising. Hope. Humanity had been brought to the edge of extinction, but they had done what no species had ever done before. They had defeated the Xilari. And now, it was time to rebuild. The first steps. Captain Ryan stood in the remains of what was once New York City. The skyline had changed. Half the buildings were gone, replaced by makeshift settlements. Davis approached him, carrying a data vat. "We've got power in Sector 5. Water filtration is online in the west. People are talking about rebuilding, not just surviving." Ryan smirked. "Good, because we're not just going back to the way things were." Humanity had changed. They had learned to fight in the shadows, to outthink their enemies, to turn weakness into strength. And they weren't going to wait for the next invasion. They were going to prepare for it. The birth of the Earth Defense Force. In the underground war bunkers that had once housed the resistance, a new organization was forming. The Earth Defense Force. Their mission? To make sure humanity would never be caught off guard again. Engineers reverse-engineered Xilari technology. Scientists studied everything the aliens had left behind. Soldiers trained in the tactics that had broken the Xilari army. For the first time in history, humans were looking beyond Earth, not in fear, but in preparation. A message to the stars. Months later, Ryan stood in front of the first human-built starship, a sleek, heavily armed vessel designed with stolen Xilari technology. Davis handed him a communicator. "You sure about this?" Ryan smirked. "Oh yeah." He activated the long-range transmitter and sent a message into deep space. "To any species who think humanity is weak, we are still here. We are still standing. And next time, we won't just fight back. We'll be coming for you." Humanity's next chapter. The Xilari had come to Earth believing humans were nothing but insects to be crushed. Now, they feared them. And as the first human warships lifted off into the sky, heading toward the unknown, one thing was certain. This was just the beginning.